Good morning, everyone. Hi. I feel like I know pretty much everyone in the room, but for those of you that I don't know, my name is Patty Diggin, and I am the director of the Cottrell Entrepreneurship Center at Westchester University. And I'm here along with my colleague, Dr. Monica Zimmerman, who is the executive director of the center. And on behalf of the Cottrell Center and Westchester University, I welcome you to our very first inaugural Success in Family Firms workshop. This is the first time that we have gone down this path with the Entrepreneurship Center and the programming that we do there. So I'm glad to have all of you here for our inaugural session. So just most of you probably are familiar with the Cottrell Center, but for those of you that this might be a little bit newer to, the center was established in 2009 as a result of a very generous grant from Gary and Claire Daniels. And it was named for Dr. Edwin Cottrell, who was a professor at Westchester University in physical education and also the golf coach at Westchester University. And Gary happened to be someone on his golf team, so that's where that relationship began. So here we are, fast forward. The center was established, as I said, in 2009, and in 2017, we moved into the brand new College of Business and Public Management on campus, and we're now coming up on about 5 years on campus there, as opposed to being located out here at the Graduate Center, which is really, really exciting for us. We have come very far since 2009, and we have very far that we want to go. So we appreciate it when you can come and engage in programming with us. If there's anything that the center can do for you, please feel free to reach out to us. We are a resource for all entrepreneurs in Chester County, not only those that are affiliated with Westchester, but those that live and work in the greater Philadelphia region. So at this time, I would like to get started with our program and turn it over to Mike McGrann, who is here from Telos, the Telos Group, and he is going to take us through this morning's workshop and talk a little bit about what's to come in future workshops. And just as an FYI, so you all know, this is being recorded. I hope that that's okay with everyone. We're going to share the link with those that are here today and also share with those that could not attend but are coming to future sessions. So thanks very much and enjoy the morning.
Thanks, Patty. Welcome. So the good news and bad. The good news is that it's a small group, and so it's going to be very intimate. There will be a lot of opportunity for a lot of discussion. The bad news is you can't hide. And as I tell people all the time, like I am so, like I teach at a university, and I'm so hungry for class participation that if you even scratch your head, I'm going to call on you. So we can't escape. So hey, we're here. We got an hour and a half. I know the most precious resource you have is your time. And so since we're here, let's use the time to really lean in and think about our own business, our families, and how this magic, strange, crazy thing of family enterprises work. So background about me. I want to actually, let me just start with a little case study. And Gary's heard me talk about this before, but a number of years ago, when I first graduated from college, I was working on Wall Street, and I got a bee in my bonnet, and I decided I wanted to have more impact on the world, so I left Wall Street and moved to the Dominican Republic, and I was living on the Dominican-Haitian border, and I was running a micro-enterprise lending project for an international relief agency, which meant that I was lending money to really small businesses on the Dominican-Haitian border in an effort to help develop the economy. And one of the first loans we made was to a group of women who were buying chickens in the town and then bringing them to the market and selling them. And it was a great gig, and everyone's all happy. And like a good banker, I would work with the women to take inventory. And I would take inventory on Wednesdays and Fridays, and all the chickens were there. But we had this strange inventory shrinkage problem only on Mondays. And my question for you as we start this day of interaction, thinking about families and business together, my question for you is, why this strange inventory shrinkage problem, but only on Monday? What do you think was going on? What was the problem? Can anybody guess? Pardon me? Foxes? Foxes were not, good guess. Wild dogs, no foxes there. All those wildlife has been wiped out basically, but it had to do with raiding the chicken coop. And Kevin, you said?
Sunday night family dinner.
Sunday night family dinner. Great guess. Actually, very close. It was, it turns out that this is 4 women, and one of the women's husband was an alcoholic, was a big drinker, put it this way. And has anybody ever been to the Dominican Republic? Have you ever been there? So you've been there, you drink any beer when you were there?
I mean, I like my feet left the sand.
Do you remember the name of the beer?
Presidente.
Presidente beer. That's right. Did you get some Presidente beer? It is the symbol of pride for the Dominican Republic, because I don't care where you are on that island. There's electricity, no electricity. You can always get an ice cold Presidente. And so I'm living on the Dominican Asian border. There's no electricity. There's no running water, but there's a ready supply of ice cold Presidente beer. And so the guys would go to the chicken fights, and when you do the chicken fights, you drink a bunch of beer. After drinking beer at the chicken fights, since there's no Taco Bell or McDonald's and you got the munchies, what do? You raid your wife's chicken coop. And that's actually what was happening. He would, Friday and Saturday nights, the husband of one of the women was eating the chickens. And naturally, so it wasn't Sunday dinner, it was, Friday night, Saturday night munchies. I'd ask the women what's going on, and they'd say, Lo siento, Miguel, like, I'm sorry, no sabemos, we don't know. They didn't want to tell the big gringo who's dishing out the money what was really going on. But I learned a couple things. I learned the profound impact that family issues can have on the competitiveness of our firms. And as a child growing up, my family had a construction business based in South Dakota, which failed for a lot of the typical family business reasons, including the Irish curse of alcoholism. So here's a family, well-known, multi-generational construction business based in South Dakota that fails. Then there's a challenge facing this small Dominican women co-op. And it's about, look, our families, all of our families are flawed. We as humans are fallen. We are flawed. Our families are flawed. And those flaws can impact the competitiveness of our firms. The wonderful things about us as human beings, the wonderful things about our families also impact the competitiveness of our firms, which is a wonderful thing. The second thing I learned is that if you ever get a bee in your bonnet and decide to move to the third world and run a micro lending project, your best bet is to lend to women, and there are better credit risks than men. Can anybody guess why? Why are women, and this is not just my opinion, this is a proven fact, that when you make small loans to businesses in the third world, women are a much better bet than men.
Women get stuff done and men talk about it.
And sit around and drink beer, right? Exactly. Women get her done. The real issue is, jokingly, but what is the real issue for women in the third world running micro enterprises? Yeah.
Stick with the theme, is it that they want to protect their families and provide for them?
Bingo. And in the Dominican Republic, there's no social safety net. There are no food stamps. If you don't feed your kids, they go hungry. And so women running these firms, they are entrepreneurs of necessity, of survival. So just FYI, if you ever get a bee in your bonnet and make that change. But the real point is about this interaction between family and business, and how familyness, we refer to this thing called familyness, how it impacts the firms that we work with, our own firm, how it impacts our families and the firms that we work with, our clients. And that's what we want to talk about during the next 3 sessions is how can we help? How can we ensure that our familyness is a source of competitive advantage, not a constraint? So just as we talk about family firms, my question for you is, some of you are in the money management business, I know, because I know a couple of you. If I told you that there is an asset class out there that outperforms all other asset class across the board, you would be interested, right? And this is a fact that family firms outcompete non-family firms. These are publicly traded because we have data on publicly traded firms. They outcompete non-family firms on every measure, critical measure of long-term competitive success. This is not in the short term, but if you look over 10 years, they outcompete on whether you're talking about income growth, revenue growth, total shareholder return, return on assets. Publicly traded family firms, Ford Motor Company, John Deere, these are family-controlled firms. Walmart, these are examples of family-controlled firms that are publicly traded. They outperform. The question is why? there's something in the soup. Campbell's, by the way, is the family, the original Campbell Soup family, lives in Philadelphia, and it's about 4th or 5th generation. They still have a lot of stock in this firm. What's in the soup? Why is it that family-owned firms outcompete? Any thoughts? Any guesses?
Personal stake in the company itself to transition to children. You're not just going to retire and leave and walk away from it. You're going to leave something, a legacy.
Our name is on the Johnson & Johnson, right? The commercial for Johnson & Johnson says what? Johnson & Johnson, a family firm, right? Their name is on the product. That's very different. We are deeply connected to, we have a part of our DNA is this firm. What else? Any other thoughts? What's a guess?
Can't fail, walk away.
If this thing goes down, our family goes down with it. I mean, so yeah, like the co-op in the Dominican Republic, but there's a lot at stake. There's a lot at stake. Our family as a brand, our pride, we have a huge economic stake in this. So yeah, if this fails, our whole thing's going down. It's like the scene of the cougar chasing a rabbit. For the cougar, this is just a day looking for lunch. For the bunny, it's the whole deal, right? Any other thoughts? Things that allow family firms to outcompete non-family firms.
They're oftentimes they're part of the board of directors, or so they have more of a, as you said, it's more of a stake, but they live it every day. Like you never leave it.
You never leave it.
For a corporation, you leave. I know from having something, when you own something, you don't ever go away. Like it's there 24/7. So constantly working it.
So it is part of our everyday life. It is in the morning, at night, all weekend, et cetera, et cetera. It is a part of what you're speaking to, Patty, I think, is also that as a manager at IBM, which of these buckets am I in? Even if I'm the president of IBM, I'm here. If I am an owner of a family business, I'm an owner, I'm a board member, if we have a board, and I'm the CEO. All these things aligned. As the CEO of IBM or picks any other publicly traded company, I'm all about growth. And when I grow the company and I go acquire that firm, what happens to my salary? My salary goes up. This is a bit of a side note, but it's a reality. And there's an article in Business Week a couple of years ago about 60% of the time when a company acquires another company, 60% of the time an acquisition occurs, it destroys shareholder value. 60%, more than half the time, when an acquisition occurs in a publicly traded market, it destroys shareholder value. And yet we see it happen all the time. Why is it happening? Why does that happen? Why is the CEO of these firms driving acquisition when most of the time it destroys shareholder value? It doesn't actually create something better, it creates something worse. For who? For the owners. Why does that happen? Why are CEOs incentivized to go out and acquire and grow through acquisition? Pardon me? Competition, but let's be honest, compensation. Compensation. I want to grow. If I grow, my point is, I can be the CEO of Coca-Cola or IBM, and if I acquire another company and we have more revenue, that's what's driving my compensation. But as an owner, I'm destroying shareholder value. It doesn't really matter to me. But in family firms, my job as a manager, since I'm also an owner, is 100% aligned. And so there is a difference in family-owned firms. Because of that alignment, what's good for me as a manager is also good for me as an owner. What's bad for me as a manager is bad for me as an owner. There's total alignment between ownership and management. So that's absolutely part of the picture. Anything else? What else? Yeah.
Nimbleness and flexibility, less aversion to risk.
Flexibility? How do you spell flexibility? I don't know. That's flexibility. Flexible spelling. Yeah, I don't have my words. Flexibility, willingness to take risk. Why is that? So here's the trick. When I agree 100%, but as you think about a client or a family you work with or your own family firm, and this is very, very true, flexibility, willingness to take risk. The key is what's at the root of that? What allows us to do that?
I don't know if it was a rhetorical question or not.
No, because it's the key. If we're going to say that family businesses can outperform, and this is, you're 100% right. What's your name? Torn. Absolutely part of it. No doubt about it. What you were saying over there, no doubt about it. But the question is, what's at the root of that? Pardon me?
Confidence in yourself.
Confidence in yourself, abide 100%. Trust. Confidence and trust. Trust in what? Lisa, is your... I can't see. Lisa.
Trust in the relationship.
Bingo. Trust. And so trust that in the relationship, if Gabrielle is my sister and we say we're going to do this, I trust 100% she's going to make it happen. I can go off and run this and trust that she's making it happen back home. That if we need to change directions, we're not fighting over silos and BSing the kind of BS that happens in publicly traded firms, because I trust her skills, I trust her motives, I trust her integrity. I trust she's going to get it done. And so that, at the root of our ability, if you think about my ability to take risk with you all, if we're all partners, it's based on trust. Trust in you. But Kevin,
Yes.
You also said, what was the thing you said?
Confidence.
Confidence in?
Itself.
Bingo. Bingo. I often tell the story when you think about empowering successors and how we empower next generation folks. I use an analogy. And the analogy is of a canoe. So are there any folks out there who are canoe? My family's from South Dakota, northern Minnesota, so love a canoe. You canoe? All right, so I say to, your name again? Torn. Torn, do you know how to canoe? You know, you do, great. You know what? Amen. Got the J stroke. Torn knows how to do it. I'm going to hop in a canoe and paddle with him out in the middle of the lake. I'll do that in a second. And I'm willing to travel, hop in a canoe, which, by the way, is a really tippy, it's a boat. It can tip over really, really easily. I'm willing to do it with him. I've never seen him paddle a canoe. I don't see a license for a canoe. I'm willing to do it. Why? Why am I willing to get in a canoe with him and paddle out in the middle of the lake? Bingo. That's exactly right. You're exactly right. Because I can swim. And I have confidence in myself that I can do it. I will travel, I will take risk with you if you change the metaphor to running a business. I'll take the metaphorical risk with you to jump in a canoe, to take a risk, to do a new thing or this or that, take entrepreneurial risk with you. One, because, as Lisa, you're pointing out, I do trust your word. And two, because Kevin points out, I trust me. I have confidence in myself that I can swim. In the realm of family business, it's not about swim, but can I make this happen myself? Am I confident in me? Do I have confidence in myself that I can get it done? And when we talk about empowering successors in family firms, it's about, are you ensuring that the successors know how to swim? In the world of business, knowing how to swim looks like what? If Gabrielle is my daughter, and transitioning from canoes to business, I want to make sure she has confidence in herself in this business that grandma, grandpa started, or something that I started, and I want bringing her in. Her having confidence means what? What does she need to do? What do I need to help facilitate? And what does she need to do to have confidence? Confidence in me, yes, but most importantly in herself, what does she need? Knowledge, experience, education. That I'm not sitting on top of her, but I've given her space to run, to have bottom line P&L experience, to have this product, or to do that, or get an education, or work outside the family business. And so when we talk about empowering successors, are we teaching them to swim? If Gabriella is my daughter, I want to make sure that she is A, B, and C, that she's maybe worked outside, or she knows what it is to have another boss other than dad. That she knows when we say that starts at 8:30 or 7 a.m., she's got to be there at 7 a.m., etc. And therefore, she trusts herself. She's willing to take risk. That's about empowering the next generation. But the root of this, our ability to take risk, is because we trust. And part of the success in family firms, therefore, is, are we doing things that build trust? Think about for a moment things that build trust and things that destroy trust. So if I want to destroy trust in this room, what can I do? I can lie. I can absolutely say, I can lie, right? What else? So I can, and that's part of, I don't have integrity. What else? I can shame you, I can attack you, I can get in your face. So it's one, my integrity. Can you trust my integrity? Secondly, can you trust that I'm going to treat you with respect? That we're going to have communication that is respectful communication. I mean, if you think about for a moment, if I change my tone of voice in this room and I'm standing next to Patty, I'm like, Patty, are you paying attention? What happens? The tone changes quickly, and we go from we're all leaning in to suddenly we're leaning back. This guy isn't safe, I can't trust. And I can do that just with tone of voice, right? So there are many, many ways. We'll talk some more about that. But how you build trust, deliberately, intentionally building trust in our system, in our families. And you know, the amazing thing about these lessons apply, whether we're just talking about our partner, or if Gabrielle's my daughter, or you know, we want to have a relate, et cetera, to also our ability to run this firm together. But are we doing things that build trust? Are we doing things to build trust? If you think about it just in terms of how many of you have kids? Does anybody have, everyone's got, yeah. Some have had kids. We have partners, we have spouses, we have siblings. You know, there's that old wise guy told me one time, you know, in terms of my kids, because I have 2.5 kids, I picked up a third kid over COVID. So that's, he kind of moved in and still there. Now, hasn't moved out yet. It was my son's roommate. My one son's off and graduated. He's got a job. My other son's in college, and his buddy from college is still living with me. He's still living in the house. But that's, yeah, exactly. When my kids are, you know, when they're 5 or 6 or 7, who decides how much time we spend together? Who decides? I do. Now that they're 21, 22, 23, who decides? They do. And whether they want to spend time over Thanksgiving, Christmas, or go on vacation together is based on what? Do we have? Pardon? What they want to do. But in terms of spending time with me is based on, do we have a relationship? Do we have a relationship? That's exactly right. And in the way we build trust is in relationship. That's where we build trust, in relationship. So where'd my clicker go? It's over here, thanks. The reality is there are many, many things in the soup. The challenge for us in working with clients, folks who own families, or we own a family business ourselves, is to look in the mirror and try and figure out what is it about our firm, our client's firm, that is truly unique. Because the fact is that family firms, they really do outcompete. They are uniquely competitive. Research shows that consumers would rather buy from a family firm than a non-family firm. In fact, there's research that looked at, would you rather buy a can of Campbell's soup at Acme or at a family-owned grocery store chain? And the cost is the same. And consumers across the board said, I'd rather buy it at the family-owned firm. Which is why Johnson & Johnson says at the end of all their commercials, Johnson & Johnson, a family-owned firm. Enterprise Rental, advertise the fact they're a family-owned firm. There's a big sign, I just drove past in Minnesota, very juicy juice, or I don't know, some juice company, I don't even know what it is. We're a family-owned firm. Folks do that because consumers prefer to buy from family-owned firms. Because when I buy from a family-owned firm, what am I getting? What am I doing? Why do they prefer? You're supporting a family. We're all from families, and we're supporting a family. And also, if Herman, I got a problem. I'm buying from Herman, and I got a problem. Who can I call? I call Herman. I can actually talk to the guy who's running the place, and that means a lot. And whether it's I'm calling Herman, I don't know what business you have or the size of it, but I work with the country's largest wholesale chocolate manufacturer. It's over $1 billion, and if you eat Dove bars or drink Hershey's chocolate, you're eating their chocolate. And customers will tell you, I got a problem. I call Hank Blummer. I can pick up the phone and call him right there. Bam, you can talk to him. Consumers prefer to do that. It is about this trust. It is something special. Our challenge is, what is it about our firm and our family that makes this place uniquely competitive? That's a unique opportunity. Yeah, Gary.
The other thing, I don't know how you read this, but probably the other uniqueness is the continuity of management and leadership. Because many publicly traded companies, people change jobs. I don't know what the average lifespan of an employee in a leadership role is, but it's probably gotten shorter and shorter over the years. And in family businesses, there's probably that's been going on for a long time. Trying to pass the baton properly maybe hasn't always worked well, but it's leadership and management teams probably been in place for a long time.
Huge. Does anybody know, like the average, that's a great point, and I saw a stat, the average lifespan of a CEO in this country is getting shorter and shorter. Does anybody know, I forgot what, it's like, yeah, exactly. And NFL, it's got the life of the average NFL running back, which is like 3 years now. Yeah. Will you raise your hand or just scratch?
No, fixing my hair.
Just fixing your hair. I told you. I mean, just if you scratch. And I'm so hungry. But yeah, that's true. And what is true is that with family firms is when we think about succession, and who is going to lead this? Typically, family firms, even if they're not doing it intentionally, which oftentimes they don't, but they are thinking intuitively, who do I want to run this business? How do I help prepare and ensure my son or daughter potentially is a great person to run the business? And the other thing is, Gary, you have a family firm. Did you ever sit around the dinner table talking about the business? May have happened. You ever? Yeah, right. Is there anything else? What else is there to talk about? That's a great point. And so when I work with successors, oftentimes I teach a class at a college in Boston, and I teach undergraduates. It's a family business course. They're some of the most sophisticated undergrads you're ever going to see, because, Herman, to your point, they've grown up talking about pricing issues or operational issues or employee issues, and it's part of their blood. And this is stuff that they just absorb. And that tacit knowledge that comes into, are you related to any of the crowd here? That's your dad. So you guys talk about it, right? So what is your name? Melissa. So you heard about business from a young age? Forever. And if my dad works for a steel company, I didn't grow up hearing about the thing. It's just different. Would you describe yourself as knowing a bit more about business than the average bear? Right. You show up. So absolutely true. And so Melissa, right, has tacit knowledge, has absorbed knowledge stuff in ways that you can't learn in a book because she's been around the family for so many firms. And that is part of what makes this special. There's a downside. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to give you I looked it up at 6.9 years average CEO tenure.
6.9 years. Yeah.
In one company.
Yeah, they move around. How long have you been in a leadership role in your company, Gary? How old are you?
I'm 67.
How long you? So how many years have you been in a leadership role in your firm? Yeah, a long time.
Probably about 45 years.
Yeah. So 6.9 versus 40, right? And you have a son who's involved in the business, and he's not leaving to go work for IBM. Never going to do it. So that same story. Now, there is a potential downside, as my great strength as a human being is also my great weakness, right? I have an incredible tolerance for ambiguity. That's great in many, many ways. It can also drive people crazy. And that is true of us as human beings. Our great strength can be our great weakness, liability. A great strength about Melissa growing up in the family firm, talking about business every night, is a wonderful thing. She's absorbed a lot. There can be a downside to that. And what I think our challenge in working with clients and working in our own family firms is, how do we create appropriate boundaries? How do we create appropriate boundaries? And in firms in which the Melissas of the world don't want to go there is because the Hermans are fighting with their spouses or complaining at the dinner table. And so there's a plus and a minus. And we often talk with families about, look, if you're going to, there's Melissa and other 3 or 4 other kids, that's great, but it's got to be positive stuff. It's got to be fun. Because why is Melissa going to come want to work for a place that creates pain for her family, her father, her mother, et cetera? So those are just things we need to think about when we're talking about the dinner, around the dinner table. But that tacit knowledge is a big part of it, a huge part of it. So a couple thoughts. I want to talk today, continue our conversation a bit about 3 concepts. One is legacy. One is the idea of what it means to be an enterprising family. And then just a couple concepts about how do we, leadership concepts, but also how do we deal with conflict? How do we deal with challenges that come up in any family? And what are some leadership frameworks we might think about? Just 4 quick, easy ones. Not easy. They're easy to understand. They're hard to implement. I want to share those. So first, this idea of legacy. And again, I know Gary's heard me talk about this, but one of the reasons, and you mentioned it implicitly, of why family firms succeed is this idea of legacy. And the amazing thing about legacy is, and whether you own a family firm or not, is legacy is the only thing that you can co-create with those around you who you love, even after you are dead. There is nothing I've ever thought of or heard about that you can do when you are gone that happens actively. You will be gone. Herman will have died and passed on, and Melissa will be co-creating her legacy. And if you think about it in terms of the folks who wrote the U.S. Constitution, our country is an amazing, wonderful country. It is flawed and it's wonderful, like families. It's good and it's bad. It's part of who we are as families. It's part of who we are as businesses and as a country. But the folks who wrote this, based on a number of ideals, and this document continues to grow and change even today. And it's survived 260 or 70 years. And while our country is flawed, yes, it is still, because I lived in the Dominican Republic. And one of the things about the Dominican Republic, if you're the president of the Dominican Republic and you want to, you've been in term for 4 years, 4 terms, and you want a 5th term, even though the Constitution says you can't, what do? You change the Constitution, you just rewrite it. You just get out the eraser and you just scratch it out and you just write it in yourself. And that's a reality. That's what happens in these countries. And part of what hasn't happened, fortunately, in our country is we have taken a document, it has evolved over time with our nation, And we are co-creating today what James Madison and others wrote 300 or 250, 75 years ago. And that's an amazing thing. And we can do the same thing. The question, therefore, is what's the legacy that you wish for your children? What is that legacy? What is it? For your business, for your family, what is it? I want to ask you, just take 3 minutes right now and just think about, what is your legacy wish? Think about a time you are gone, you are not here on earth. What is it that you wish will be left behind for those you love? Just take 3 minutes. Just give it some thought, write it down, whatever. We'll start a clock right now. I got it. Just take 3 minutes. Just think. Yeah, you did. Yeah, party. Any things that anyone would be willing to share in terms of the things we'd like to leave behind?
So,
Lisa, do you have children?
I do, children and grandchildren.
Children and grandchildren. So how many kids do you have?
3.
3 kids, okay.
So, my desire, my legacy wish is to, for my children to have to a blah, 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 blah. Let me start again.
Well, I don't understand that wish quite well.
My courage and faith.
Courage and faith.
The desire to grow our business and church with the foundations that we established, and then put their own selves, their own ideas into it. And then my determination. So the way I looked at legacy was not only the tangible, but the intangible.
Beautiful.
That's why I had to rewind it and do it again.
Beautiful. Others. Gary.
I'll give you mine. My family members all accept Jesus Christ. My family members love and respect each other. All family members are thankful and grateful for what they have, and all family members work hard and are generous to others.
Others. Yeah.
I wish to leave behind the resources and opportunities for my children to pursue their chosen path in life that brings them the most happiness.
Anyone else? What's interesting about that is that oftentimes when people, well, let me back up. We often think about legacy and what we're leaving behind in terms of there's a business or there's a portfolio of stock or there's a bucket of cash or whatever the things. and yet what you're talking about have nothing to do with things. Nothing to do with things. They are to do with what's here. And the question, and I think the opportunity we have, and that's not to say that things don't matter. Things matter a lot. Like businesses matter a lot. Businesses matter because they create wealth and opportunity for our families and our communities. And frankly, if we don't have businesses and we're not developing entrepreneurially and developing business in this country, we're in deep doo-doo. So I'm all about, yeah. But ultimately, it is the kinds of things that you're talking about here that allow for those other things to thrive. The real lesson, I think, is, are you being deliberate about making that happen? And how so, right? How are you doing it? You can't beat kids over the head. Look, I was a college football player and wanted nothing more than my kids to play football. So I bought them helmets when they were 2 and cleats and stuff. And I was out there doing drills in the backyard and making them run and all that stuff. And guess what? They never, ever touched or played. The more intense you are, I think, as a parent about, you got to do this, like the more they regurgitate. But so you can't force this stuff. But the question is, what can we do on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis to make this a reality? To help co-create, this is the key word, to co-create our legacy. Because the legacy you describe, and all I'm sure, this is not just me, it's folks around me. And so how do I ensure that we are co-creating that today while we're alive, so that what is left behind when we are gone, which continues to be co-created, like the U.S. Constitution, is in line with what we hope for. That's the challenge. And I just wrote down things. And when we asked this question, the answers are very similar to what you said, and whether it's around values or history, heritage, faith, relationships, community, philanthropy, etc. It's usually not, I want to make sure that my GRAT 249 or all the stuff that Gary could tell you about gets from here to there, past IRS. Those aren't it. I have a cautionary tale about unintended legacy. And the unintended legacy, and this is a story I've told many times, but it was very powerful. I remember sitting with an attorney and a client, a mutual client of ours. So here's me, here's the attorney, and the mutual client. And the attorney says to the mutual client, Bob, I really need you to set aside some money because, when we read the will, there's going to be a lawsuit. It's just a reality. Look, your kids, there's a battle, and, they don't get along, and up it up. And, and the guy's like, all right. And I'm thinking to myself, this is horrific because this individual's legacy will be one of what? Turmoil, confusion, pain, agony, cost, money poured down the drain into the pocket of the attorney. The attorney's a fine person. Not that whatever we want to say about attorneys, this individual one was a fine person, wasn't trying to hurt his client, but had literally codified a legacy of pain and anger and anguish. And Bob's a good guy. It's not like he wanted that, but the question is, when you step back. So this issue of legacy is thinking about what do we ultimately wish for, and are we intentionally doing that every day? At one level, and this is not unlike the relationships with those that we love in our lives. And in every substantive interaction, we are creating closeness or distance. And I'm not talking about, Gabrielle are sitting and having dinner, ask her to pass the salt. But in every substantive interaction, we are creating closeness or distance. I'm actually listening and demonstrating curiosity about what she thinks and feels, etc., or not. And legacy is the same way. We are building that legacy little by little or draining it little by little. That's the incredible opportunity. And it's an appropriate starting place for a discussion about what do we really want for this family firm, for our family and our business. Any thoughts, comments? Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. I believe that we have to live it and then teach it.
So consistent with my, like I got intense about my kids playing football, they regurgitated. If my kids see me sitting on the couch all day eating potato chips, never going to work, are they going to develop a work ethic? I can yap at them, scream at them from the couch with the bag of potato chips on my stomach all day long about get to work, work at it. But if they don't see it, they don't experience it, they're not going to get it. They have to see it, 100%. They absorb. It's not what you say, it's what you do. I mean, incredibly true. Herman.
I just want to apologize. I have to leave.
Oh, you got to leave.
I really don't want to. But I can't wait for the next one.
Herman, thank you for coming, though. Yeah, you bet. You bet. We'll make sure Monica takes notes and not talks about you. Monica, don't talk about your dad when he's gone. Melissa. I'm sorry, Melissa. Melissa? Okay.
I was just going to ask you a question. In your experience in this world of email and Amazon and everything online, do you see a deterioration of how people perceive this? How important has this ticked down a few notches in the importance in business relationships that if I'm a buyer, I don't necessarily value that as much as I did 10 years ago?
So it's a great question, and it's hard to make it. And to make a really specific answer to that requires a lot of research. So that's an incredible opportunity for research. What I do know for sure, and I work with hundreds and hundreds of family firms, is part of what is valued by within the supply chain by both customers and suppliers in family firms is this, that I can trust this firm as a supplier, I can trust them as a customer. And you're going to you ate over there, I won't tell you who it is, but you ate over there a product manufactured by a very well-known family firm that works really hard to develop deep and profound relationships, this kind of stuff, and actually talks about this kind of stuff and how they run their firm within the supply chain. In my experience then, in the world of family-owned firms, privately held firms, this stuff matters a lot in growing importance. And yes, Amazon exists, and Amazon doesn't care.
I think to your point there, it matters more now to the business. Because this is what we sell.
Yeah.
Right?
Bingo. Because we're not competing on, unless we're manufacturing in China, we're not competing on price. We're competing on something very different. And part of it is right here. Right here. Gary, I know you had your hand up and then.
Well, I think the other challenge for people who, beyond the first generation, especially the first generation creators of entities, is not helping your children as much as you can. I've watched so many parents pour money at their children because they didn't have any. I still remember one of the fellows I worked with, one of 11, and he has 6 or 7 kids himself, and he's worried about his kids get out of college, what kind of new vehicle they were going to lease, and he was racking up, quite an overhead. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I said, let me tell you, how worried was your mom? He started laughing. The door didn't shut. It barely. It was like Fred Flintstone. But I think that when you're from affluence because you've created wealth, it's really hard to fold your arms and let your children struggle, fail, and learn the lessons that we learn. I think it's the hardest thing to do as a parent. So it's because it creates. It's a big advantage to have nothing.
Yeah.
Because you have this incredible need to survive, and you learn a lot that way. And so I find that it's a big struggle for the family business owner to, set the path for their children that helps them learn things the hard way as they did.
how do you instill a sense of grit in your kids? And if you enable them and don't let them fail, you cripple them. And you're right, Gary. It is really hard. And that's the dual side. That's the blessing and curse that we all have. Absolutely right. Someone else? Yeah, you're sorry, Patty.
I just had a comment, Kevin, about like Amazon in particular. If you notice a lot of their branding now, it is to try and focus on family in the way that they perceive it. So they have like an advertisement right now that's running with a man that worked at Amazon and then took care of his brother, took care of his mother. They both died. So he decided to become a nurse. And because of working at Amazon, he could follow that dream. So they're weaving in the whole family, and they do that a lot in their marketing. They also have a whole marketing around how they provide a vehicle for small businesses that are family-owned to thrive on their platform. So they get that even though they're big, they have to appear small to the consumer because I think they understand that psyche.
Yeah, good point. But I couldn't agree more with what you're saying, Kevin. I mean, within the supply chain, this issue of working with firms that are this matters a lot. And having many firms I work with are very out front about where they stand on these issues. The issue that, Gary, you're raising, though, as a parent, as a leader in a family firm, that's really hard. It's really hard. Why? Here's a question for us to think about as parents. Why? Why is that so hard? Pardon? Why, I want to make sure I'm clear. It's really hard to not enable and create a sense of entitlement. Look, entitlement, we are entitled to respect. I want my daughters to be sense of entitlement to being respected by a man that they're in a relationship with, or whatever the relationship is. I want my sons. There's a whole list of things that we should, as human beings, be entitled to. And there's an entire list of things we should not. And that line can be mushy. And I think what Gary's saying is that's a tricky line. But there's some, are we entitled to a job? If I'm drinking in the morning and snorting Coke in the afternoon, am I entitled to a job working? Can I get to work for you? And you're going to pass. But if I'm your son, can I work for you? You're going to have to pass. And yet it can be tough. Because why? It's your family.
Might be an owner.
Might be an owner.
And I agree with Gary because we're in that same situation. Our son works for us, and he is our multimedia coordinator. And there are times I want to take him, bring him, and we're come on in, but it's difficult.
It is.
Because his work is difficult to, as that parent, and at the same time as his teammate and boss, you want to say, listen, you gotta learn. But it's difficult. That line is hard.
Yeah, I want. Yeah.
Well, Mike, you have a lot of experience in multi-generational success stories. Because every family business struggles with these same fundamental issues. And there's some kind of guiding principles, I think, that you've shared over the years that, companies that are third, fourth. Didn't we have this Tabasco family?
Yeah.
Or fifth or sixth generation.
Yeah,
They figured some stuff out that I forget the statistic. How many businesses make it to the third generation?
So it's a great. So not many, right? And the statistics are they're a little misleading, but they say 30% make it from first to second, about 10% second to third, and like 3% from third to fourth. Those don't reflect the fact that one generation can be 40 years of leadership. And the average lifespan, if you look up the average lifespan of a publicly traded firm, is not as long. So they're misleading. But the real point is, it is during those transitions that family firms tend to fail. Unless they get driven out of business by Walmart or a Chinese competitor. But it's during those transitions. But the other thing is that one of the keys, and this is jumping ahead to some other workshops we'll do, but how do you defining boundaries in families is tough, right? I mean, if I'm sitting on Patty's lap right now, we know what? There's a problem, right? There's a problem. And it might be a great lecture, a great discussion, best ever. But why is this freak sitting on our lap? Like, it's just weird. He violated a boundary, right? We know that. So there are implicit boundaries in our relationship right now, and we all know the rules. Unless we got something off, sometimes we know people. We all know the person who will stand talking to you, stand like this, and the close talker, whoever. But in general, we know the boundaries. In families, those boundaries get really mushy. They get really mushy. And metaphorically, Patty's my sister, I'll sit on her lap, like metaphorically, in terms of how I treat her, how I talk to her, how I, whatever. The challenge in families is to clarify those boundaries. One example of the kind of things Gary's talking about is what's called a family involvement policy. Here are the rules. And typically, to Lisa's point, we want those defined in advance before the son or daughter comes to work. So when we say work starts at 8, work starts at 7:30, this is the rule. You will be evaluated. You will be compensated this way. This is how we're going to compensate you. This is the expectations of your job. If you don't perform, this is what's going to happen. Just like if I show up and work for Gary and I don't perform, this is what's going to happen. It's really clear. If Mike McGrann's working for him, what's going to happen? Or Lisa. Now, I'm Mike. I'm not your family member. It's really clear. I get confused, though, because I am your son. And our job in these things is to find those rules in advance. Here's how it's going to work. And that's an example of a boundary. The idea of co-creating our legacy, though, we talked about that, and I'm just encouraging all of us to think about what that legacy is and talk about it. Talk about it with the next generation. Here's my wish. Here's my goal. And talk about it, even if you don't have a family firm or you're thinking about it, just with your spouse, your kids. I want to share a framework also about what it means to be an enterprising family. And this is an opportunity, I think, that we all have as owners of family firms or folks that work with family firms. And that is to think about the difference between do we want to be an enterprising family? And what I mean by that is, in terms of strategically, when we're running the business day to day, man, you got to run the business. You got to make the donuts, 100% in. But in terms of when you step back and you look at your business from a 30,000-foot level, when you begin thinking of yourself as an owner, not just a manager, but thinking of yourself as an owner, the questions we ask ourselves are different. If we have our manager hat on, we're thinking, do we have enough cash for payroll? Is so-and-so's got a bloody nose, or Jimmy's got COVID, and that's this day-to-day stuff. But do we take time to step back and think of ourselves as owners? Because if we think of ourselves as an owner of the firm, what do we ask? What's the question we ask ourselves? If I'm an owner of IBM, I am. What do I ask? I'm very small. But what am I thinking about in terms of ownership of IBM?
How's your portfolio?
How's it performing? Big picture, is this a good investment? How often do we think about our own family firm from that perspective? Is this a good investment? What kind of return are we getting? And I'm not saying you're necessarily going to make a decision to sell just because you're not getting the return you want, but at least be intentional about it. And transition how we think about ourselves from, we're a family that, what kind of work do you do?
In the flooring distribution business.
Flooring distribution. Flooring distribution. Oh, I'm going to refloor my house. I should talk to you. There you go. In the flooring distribution. So, are we a family that provides a service, runs trucks, does this, have these customers? Are we a flooring distribution family? Are we a beer family? Are we a bacon family? Or, and, let me say and, can we also think of ourselves not just as operators, a mindset, we're a family that makes beer, distributes flooring. Can we think of ourselves as a group of investors? Are we getting a good return on this investment? And if not, why not? And similarly, can we think of ourselves not just from a managerial perspective, I'm worried about who's got COVID and who doesn't and whether, et cetera, but can we think of ourselves and begin thinking entrepreneurially, how and where might we grow this business? Where are there opportunities? I remember working with a grocery store chain, and it's a big, you all know the name, and Walmart's coming to town, and they're trying to think about what are we going to do and who should we be, and some of the next generation saying, well, maybe we sell the business and just become real estate folks. And the whole time, Dad it's like on the second story above one of the grocery stores, and Dad's looking out the window, and you can just see, like, we're trying to talk about how we fight Walmart, and he's looking out the window, and finally, like, the daughter's like, what are you doing, Dad? This is pretty important. He goes, well, Mrs. Smith just ran into the shopping carts out there. Like, who's responsible for the shopping carts? They're all over the parking lot. It's like he couldn't get out of that managerial perspective and begin thinking more entrepreneurial. He couldn't make that shift. And I'm not saying that the shopping carts don't matter, they do, but can we take a step back? And if we come at this from an entrepreneurial and enterprising mindset, from an investor perspective, are we making a good return? If yes, great. If not, where, why, how? And where and how might we grow? Where and how should we take more risk? Can we? And in conjunction with that, begin thinking of ourselves not just as a family that does distribution. This is our operating business here. But where are there other assets in, quote, our portfolio? And how might we continue to grow that, or invest here, or invest there, or manage this effectively? Again, I remember working with a family that owned a bunch of hardware stores, and they thought of themselves, we're hammers and nails. This is what we do. We sell hammers and nails. If you looked at their balance sheet, the largest asset on their balance sheet was not hammers and nails and lumber. It was what? It was real estate. And they never even, and it was real estate down the shore. Gary knows them, but they're down the shore, and they have this huge lumber yard, a block and a half from the shore. And if you think of real estate as a strategic asset, you might want to think about what? And can we move the lumber yard, 100 yards onto the shore, and we could do some other things there. But if in our mindset we're a hardware family and all we do is sell wood, we don't even think about real estate as an asset. We don't spend a lot of time thinking about how might we build a portfolio, because one of the things that allows us to take risk in family firms is yes, an enterprising mindset and looking for opportunities, but also if we have some financial cushion. And if we're betting the farm every time we open a new business or buy a new truck or something and we don't have any financial reserves, that limits our ability to take risk. And then also, my point is, in my family, we have a cottage in northern Minnesota. And what's going to happen to that cottage is a big deal. And who owns it and how we're going to split it up and all that stuff. And my dad will not talk about it. Won't do it. My sisters and I are like hungry, like he won't do it because it's whatever. And some families have cottages, or you have a painting, or grandma's this or grandpa's that, whatever it is. But heirloom assets are very, very real. For many families, philanthropy is an incredible opportunity to engage the next generation and contribute to the community. And how is that an active part of our portfolio that we think about from an ownership, a family enterprising ownership perspective? I'm just saying that I don't know how many of these assets apply to you, but it's an opportunity to expand a conversation at the family level about what we do together as a family. Questions? Comments?
Mike, I would say, having worked with families for over 40 years, it's a difficult conversation for, the first or second, the father or the mother, along a lot of these issues. They don't really have the proper method by which they think about how do you look at all those, number one, and then who do you have the conversation with? Because in my experience, a lot of it's, you're talking to attorneys about technical issues and documents and all that, but it's not about
Bingo.
That's after you've thought through.
Yeah.
Your plan, or if you think about all that is, requires architecture. How do I deal with all this stuff that we have, and then how do I communicate that to my family members in a way that makes sense? I think that's the biggest challenge that every entrepreneur faces.
So there's two critical issues there. One is the technical side, that you need technical, skilled folks that can help you think about estate planning and the legal issues, all that stuff. And my experience, to your point, Gary, is oftentimes that gets in front of the actual conversation with the family about what does this stuff mean to us? And transparency about what we actually have. And maybe it's $10,000 or $10 million, but what is it in all these buckets? And can you switch that? That's what I'm saying. And I agree that I think your point is unbelievably important. We let the technical side of that get in front. And I'm just saying switch it. It can be really hard, though, to talk about whether it's $10 in the bank account or $10 million. It can be really hard. Why? What makes transparency about this stuff hard?
Everybody might not be treated exactly the same.
And in families, this issue is really, really tough. Because the reality is that fair does not mean equal. And I'll share another reality for families is that voice does not mean vote. Because at the end of the day, if Patty and I are married and you're all our kids, whose call is it about what's going to happen to all this?
Patty's. You have a 49% say.
Yeah, exactly. In reality, whose call is it? It's ours. The idea of co-creation is that we can talk about this with transparency, that we're giving all the kids in the room a voice, and by doing that, we can listen and they can express opinions. But at the end of the day, the rest of the gang's got to respect that at the end of the day, it's going to be our call. And this is really tough for families. I remember my wife, I tell a story about, in Easter, counting the jelly beans, like in everybody's basket, like making sure that every kid has the same number of jelly beans in the basket. I'm like, this, because if in family, it's all got to be equal, right? But that's not life. And 1 + 1 = 2. That is a mathematical formula. The number of jelly beans in the basket, we can count that. But is it fair that she's got a big red cup and I don't have one of those? Because fair is my perception, your perception, and there is sometimes we're aligned and sometimes we're not. It's totally different. 1 + 1 = 2. We know that is a reality. What I think is fair and what you think is fair are two different things. So this is very, very difficult. Transparency, dialogue, and co-create together what we want to do with this whole bucket here, understanding that fair is not equal. And just because I'm giving you a voice doesn't mean you have the final vote. And we can respect that. The freedom, here's one thing though. If oftentimes Patty and I don't want to talk about it because we feel like you all are going to have a big opinions and we don't agree. We don't want to do that. My point back is it doesn't matter. Just know that you had the final vote. So all you got to do is listen and ask questions. And in doing this is co-creating our legacy. Yeah, Patty.
What do you do, though, about the senior individual that really does not budge? Like you mentioned, I don't want to get too much. This is funny because it's like we're talking business and personal at the same time, which I get.
It is.
Family enterprise, but they're the elder and they see themselves as the elder, even though they're really not any longer, because they've probably retired, but they still think it's their business, or they haven't retired, but they're kind of just there. They're really not willing, like you said, your dad. They're not willing to have the conversation. How do you say you should have done that earlier? That's how I feel sometimes. I feel like the boat is passed, and suddenly that person is, and they may not always be, as cognitively with it as well. So then you're really in trouble.
Yeah. So it's a complex question. I'll just say a couple things on that. One is, my dad changed my diapers, but in about 10 years, guess what I'm going to be doing? I'm going to be changing his diapers. That's exactly right. And that conceptual shift is really tough for adults to get their head around, but it is a reality. And while this is my father, can I go from father-son to peer and see myself as a true peer to him? I'm an adult, he's an adult, we are peers. And that allows me to have a peer-to-peer conversation. Must I ultimately accept the reality that right now he's got the vote? I cannot change that. He will not. I'm going to be in Minnesota visiting him in 2 weeks. My sisters and I are going to be there, and we're going to have a conversation. And he might tell us to buzz off, and he might not. But all we can do is try to have a conversation from a peer-based conversation. We love you, Dad. We love this place. This stuff has been it's been 5 generations in our family, original settlers and whatever. But we need to have the conversation. I will say one other thing about succession, which hints at a future conversation, is that, what's your name?
Mike.
Mike also. Mike is my dad, and Mike is not willing to deal with succession issues. Now, one of the questions I have for Mike is my dad, Dad, do you want to see this go down the next generation? The answer for Mike is what? Yes. What I would say to Dad is, Dad, Mike, there are resources, capabilities, relationships embodied in you. We all know that. He knows customers, he knows suppliers, he knows who to call if the truck breaks down, if he can't get this product, who I call, knows everybody in the industry. If we don't take that stuff that's in his head and transition it to the next generation, Monica, right? Melissa, I'm so sorry, Melissa. Bad eyes, bad ears, but the head's half gone. We don't transition to the next generation, and he gets hit by the bus, or because Father Time is going to claim this for all of us, we fundamentally change the resource pool of this firm, and it cannot compete the way it did in the past. So, Mike, I get succession's tough, and I'm not talking about putting you out to pasture. We're getting you to transition up, not out. We can talk to Gary about what that looks like. He's been in leadership for 40 years. He's not making day-to-day decisions about buying what color toilet paper we buy. Are you? He's not. Now, he's got the next generation doing that, but he is transitioned up. He is not out. Mike, we need you to transition up, not out. But the reality is also, to your point, Patty, Mike, if you're serious about succession, we got to talk about how we transition those resources, capabilities. Because if you don't, you're really not serious about succession. Because you will change, you're gone and we don't do that, we change the resource pool and we can't compete. We got to try to change the dialogue, to your point, from this is a death issue to it's a strategy issue. That's how we try to address some of those concerns. Does it work? No. Why not? How come Mike won't transition? What's the reality as a human being? He's afraid of what? He's afraid of death. Succession equals death. Another big issue, challenge for many, many senior generation leaders is it's like, you see the
What are you going to do?
bingo. What are you going to do?
Doing this.
What?
Worry about those shopping carts.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like you see that big, tough, mean linebacker from the NFL is retiring and he's bawling in tears. Why? Because if he's not running people over, if he's not an NFL player, what is he? And our identities get tied up in that. That is our challenge, though, is to help senior generation folks like Mike figure out, what am I going to do next? What does it look like when I transition up, not out? We're going to have more conversations about succession in our coming sessions. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Yeah, in the way back.
2-minute break just to change the battery out?
Yeah, you know what? We're wrapping up. We have 5 minutes left in the whole thing. So let's just there's a component that we haven't gotten to, but we'll save it for the next session, which is this issue about relationships and how we manage conflict. That's a whole other bucket of discussion here, which we'll save for the next session. But other questions, comments? Part of what we wanted to do is allow you guys to ask Gary questions. Gary's done this thing of succession. He's done the succession. He's transitioned up. He's not out. So we have an opportunity to ask Gary specific questions of someone who's actually lived it. Yeah.
So curious about maybe like your thoughts, and Gary, it sounds like you've been down this road a bit more than we have. Family-run businesses where siblings of a generational owner are not in the business, right? And have not lifted a finger in the business their whole life. Yet the person who has basically grown up in the business, started in the business, now owns the business. Mom and dad then pass away. There are resources and things, expectations. I guess managing those expectations between people who've done nothing and have a handout, and people who have earned, right? Fair might not be equal, right? Have earned the right.
I want to ask Gary, because he's got a lot of perspective on it, but just think about in terms of Lisa, you've got one son, 3 kids, right? Do all of them work in the business?
Just 2.
Just 2. So the question, like for Lisa, is I've got 2 family members down here working here, right, in management. And yet I built this thing. It's something I built for the whole family. Do I allow all 3 to be in owners, even though only 2 are in management? And that is a great question and a huge challenge. I know Gary has struggled with that.
It's one of the biggest hurdles families encounter. And that's why having this plan first with your values and your philosophy thought through, because most families you have children active and you have children inactive, and you have to think through how that's going to all work and make sure, because without a plan, if the one child that you had 4 children, one's been building the business with the first generation, when mom or dad pass, he's a minority shareholder. And what happens is non-contributors or their spouses start looking at the lifestyle of the one who's working there night and day. He has a bigger house, he may have a bigger car, it doesn't feel equal, and it just creates havoc and destroys most businesses, by the way, especially in that situation with this minority interest. If there's 2 and 2, then it could be just legal fights and squabbles. So I would say that the biggest challenge for family business owners is, first of all, to have a plan. Think through, what do the owners want? What do you think should be the outline of dealing with some of these things? Because usually the owner has other stuff for the non-active people, or a buy-sell for the active to take out the inactive and eliminate this harmony. But without that, what happens is, when mom and dad pass, the last thing any parent wants is for their children and then their grandchildren to be at each other. Like,
Right.
and I'm sure we've all experienced, without good thinking and strategy, the more there is, the more turmoil. And I'll never forget a friend of mine who's a competent tax attorney said, I said, what's wrong? He says, I am in the middle. He because I have this one family. They have hundreds of millions of stuff, and they had one property at the shore that they all shared.
You know, this is going.
And my
Yeah,
children,
yeah.
and none of them are now speaking to one another because of the conflict. You know, we didn't deal with
Around the one
the
thing.
one thing that they all, you know. So again, you know, when you have a family, there's more than that one house. So that it's really thinking through how do you get a plan that prevents them from being at each other. You know, and so you know it's you know, but it starts with the first generation has to think through some of the stuff, you know, starting with their values and what they want, and then figure out how to create a plan that accomplishes that, and then trying to communicate that to everybody while you're still here is the other point. Having that annual family meeting with all the people that touch you, you know, the accountants, the investment folks, the insurance attorneys, whoever's with the family, at least with the at least with the leaders of that family first, and then if you whoever else you want to include second. And I can tell you, it's very difficult to you know, because everybody has concerns about communicating.
So
once you do it,
yeah.
it's like, thankful we did that.
So 3 quick frameworks because we're out of time, but I want to just frame up what Gary just said. Number 1, summary, what he said. Open, honest conversation about, look, this is what we have. This is what we built. This is where we made some mistakes. This is what we're trying to do, mom and dad, and what do you guys think? Open, honest conversation. This is what we have. What are we going to do with it? Because clearly the family he referenced didn't talk about what are we going to do with this one asset, the one on which actually everyone's all actually really, really deeply care about. So transparency and open dialogue with this. What do we want to do with this stuff? Number 1. Number 2, Kevin, I think Kevin, right? Kevin, your question fundamentally gets to a critical step for any multi-generational family is if you think about the founder, Gary was the head of management, he was a chairman of the board, and he was the owner all in one. But when we go to the next generation, we have to begin separating these functions of what it means to be an owner, which is different than board, which is different than management. We need to do that because we got to have different hats. We're talking about different things at different times. Let's clarify what our job as owners are. Hatfield Meats, the bacon company, they've got 345 owners of their business. Hatfield Meats, there's like 3 to 4 generations. There's only 10 of them that work here. Only 10. So is it feasible to have IBM? I don't work for IBM, but I'm an owner. Hatfield Meats, Privately Held Company, they have owners who are not in managers. They have 10 of them down here. They got 345. So it's a governance challenge. To Gary's point, though, it does create real issues, particularly if I'm Gary's son, I busted my tail, and all of a sudden my brother, my sister, my brother decide they want to sell the business out from underneath me because they want a bunch of money, they want a bunch of cash. So separating these functions, what it means to be an owner, and there's only a couple of things that my job as an owner, there's only a couple. We'll talk about those next time. That's different than management. So we got to separate those and then decide what are the rules, because it's your call. If you want to be this, you have to be a manager. That's possible. And then there are other firms like Hatfield Meats that say, we're okay if we have owners who are not managers. There's complexity there, but it's manageable. One other quick thought, and we'll talk more about this, is it also gets to compensation. And one of the things Gary talked about is this idea of a family involvement policy. Part of that policy is what's required for the kids to be able to work here, but also is as a team coming together and saying, what are the different buckets of compensation that you possibly have access to? And separate those and make it very clear. Salary, do you get paid at market or above or below? And if you don't show up for work, are you getting paid? If I'm Lisa's son and I decide I'm taking 4 days off, do I still get paid? I mean, but it sounds silly, but sometimes we get confused. And bonus is a part of my salary that's at risk. And as a result, if we're serious about bonus and I'm Lisa's kid, my sister might make more money than me. because she did better and her bonus is higher. We got to clarify that. That's a tough pill to swallow because fair and equal in families. The third is, what are the rules about perks? Do I get a cell phone? Do I get a car? Do I get all the things? What are the rules? What are the rules? And as families get bigger and bigger, the perks that Mike got for himself and Gary gave himself cannot be the same. Because when we go from having 1 or 2 owners to 2 or 12, or now in Hatfield, 345, we can't give cars to all 345 shareholders. They ain't getting cell phones, they're not getting a country club, they're not getting health care, et cetera, et cetera. We got to clarify those perks. And then finally, dividends. And you only get a dividend if you are a what? An owner. So Lisa might be paying herself a couple bucks at the end of the year, dividends, and ain't going to the rest of the gang. But can we pay dividends? Are we not? And who's getting equity? These are conversations, and I will say it is arguably one of the most important conversations that as owners, what are the rules? What are the rules of the game? It's complex. It's complex. Now, Kevin, I know that like I'm shooting this stuff out and I talk about it all the time, so there's a ton of stuff I'm throwing out there. It is complex. It is manageable though, but it just has to be intentional. We're a little past 10. We said we'd finish at 10. Patty's like, you finished at 10. Don't go past 10.